You are 40 feet underground when the lights flicker, and the concrete walls hum with a deep, unnatural resonance, like the earth itself has been struck by a god's hammer, and in the silence that follows, the distant wail of emergency sirens cuts off mid-scream. The Smart Sort hub's machinery stutters, then resumes its work, conveyor belts still sliding empty pallets into the dark as if nothing has changed. But the transceiver on your desk crackles with a looping message, a calm, automated voice reciting coordinates for a medical bunker 12 miles east, a place that might as well be on the moon now. Around you, the other technicians are frozen, their faces pale under the fluorescence, their breath held as the radio sputters with other signals, a weather report for a city that no longer exists, a traffic update for highways turned to glass, a child's toy singing a lullaby through static.
The air tastes like burnt plastic and stale sweat. My head throbs, not the gentle ache of a hangover, but the kind of pain that suggests my skull might have been used as a kick drum. Concrete digs into my back, cold and unyielding. Last thing I remember, a flash so bright it seared my retinas, then nothing. Now I'm sprawled on the floor of the Smart Sort shipping hub, 40 feet underground, with a respirator strapped to my face and exactly one bullet left in my sidearm. Day 1. Fucking fantastic. I force myself onto my elbows and the world tilts like a bad carnival ride. The bunker's emergency lights hum, casting long shadows from the stacks of shipping containers. My respirator's filter is at 70%, which means I've got time, just not enough to be stupid about it. The air's thick with the stench of ozone and something sour, like spoiled milk left in a microwave. I pat myself down. No major injuries, just scrapes and a bruise on my ribs that'll probably turn into a masterpiece of purple by tomorrow, assuming there is a tomorrow. The sidearm's weight in my hand is comforting, but one round might as well be a fucking paperweight if I run into trouble. Do I waste it on a test shot, see if the noise draws anything? Or save it for something with teeth? My throat's sandpaper, and the canteen on my belt is bone dry. Priorities, water, then a weapon, then figuring out why the hell I'm alone down here. The Smart Sort hub's supposed to be staffed 24/7, where's the night crew? The silence is worse than the answer. A metallic clang echoes from the far end of the bunker. Not random, something or someone just knocked over a pallet jack. I freeze, counting seconds. 5, 10. No follow-up, could be a survivor, could be a rat the size of a Labrador. Either way, I've got to move. Staying here means waiting for the air to run out or the shadows to get hungry. The bunker is a maze of towering shipping containers, their surfaces cold and unyielding. The hum of the emergency lights is a constant, but it's the other sounds that catch my attention. Drips of water echo from unseen corners, each drop a reminder of the damp, oppressive environment. A distant creak like metal groaning under pressure adds to the tension. The wind seems to whisper through the narrow passages between the containers, carrying with it the faintest trace of something rotten. Then the lights flicker, once, twice. On the third pulse they die completely. The darkness swallows everything, and from somewhere in the black something scrapes against concrete, slowly, deliberately, like it's got all the time in the world. My muscles tense, every nerve ending alive with the need to move, but I stay still, listening. The cold seeps deeper into my bones and my stomach growls, a low, persistent reminder of my hunger. The scraping continues, closer now. My hand tightens around the sidearm, the cold metal a stark contrast to the warmth of my skin. The air is thick with the stench of decay, and I can almost taste the fear. The bunker is a tomb, and I'm not sure if I'm the only one left inside. The air tasted of burnt plastic and despair. Day 1. I've been crawling through the wreckage of the Smart Sort shipping hub for what felt like an eternity, my respirator wheezing like a dying asthmatic. 70% filter life left, not great, but not dead yet. The control room loomed ahead, its reinforced door hanging ajar like a broken jaw. Inside, flickering monitors cast ghostly blue light over a landscape of shattered glass and spilled coffee. My head throbbed, a relentless drumbeat behind my eyes, but I couldn't stop. Not yet. The transceiver was here. It had to be. I stepped in, glass crunching under my boots. The sound echoed in the silent room, mingled with the distant drip of water and the whisper of a cold draft. The smell hit me first, ozone and something sour like overheated electronics. My sidearm weighed heavy on my hip, 1 round left. 1. Not enough to fight anything, but enough to make me feel like I wasn't completely defenseless. The transceiver sat on the far desk, a hulking beast of a machine, its antennae twisted like skeletal fingers. I wiped sweat from my forehead and approached, my fingers trembling as I flipped the power switch. Nothing, of course. "Come on, you piece of junk," I muttered, slamming the side panel. The machine sputtered, then roared to life, its screen glowing faintly. Static hissed through the speakers, a white noise purgatory. I adjusted the frequency dial, my hands slick with sweat, and that's when I heard it, voices. Faint, garbled, but unmistakably human. My stomach twisted, ghost signals, echoes of the dead or the damned. I froze, torn between hope and dread. The respirator hissed, reminding me of its dwindling filter. If I stayed here, fiddling with this thing, I'd burn through what little protection I had left. But if I left now, I might miss something crucial, a distress call, coordinates, anything. The voices crackled again, fragmented and distant. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, panic. "All right, Elias," I muttered under my breath, "time to make another terrible decision." I cranked the gain, the static growing louder, more oppressive. The voices sharpened briefly, a woman's voice pleading, then a man shouting something about evac. My chest tightened. This wasn't just a ghost signal, this was real, or it had been. The respirator hissed again, louder this time. 65%, shit. Then the transceiver squealed, a high-pitched feedback loop that felt like a knife in my skull. I slammed the power button, but the machine didn't shut off. The screen flickered, displaying a single word in jagged capital letters, incoming asterisk. My hand hovered over the dial, my pulse racing. Incoming what? Broadcast, signal. Or something worse. The respirator hissed again, its filter life ticking down. I couldn't stay here, but I couldn't leave. The transceiver screeched again, louder this time, and the screen went black. "Fantastic," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "Just fucking fantastic." The cold air seeped into my bones, and the distant drip of water seemed to mock my helpless situation. The wind howled outside, a relentless reminder of the desolation around me. I had to make a choice, and every second that passed felt like a betrayal of the time I had left. The transceiver hissed static, a relentless white noise that had been my only companion for the last 3 hours. I dragged myself into the control room, sweat stinging the cuts on my palms, convinced I'd finally hear a voice. Instead, it was just the same looping garble, numbers, codes, automated systems chattering to dead air. Day 1, and already the world felt like a corpse twitching with leftover electricity. The respirator's filter was down to 70%, and every breath tasted like burnt plastic in my own sour panic. I ran the frequency scan again, fingers trembling over the console. The screen flickered **12, 7 MHz**, a military band. For a second, my gut lurched. Then the transmission resolved into a cold, robotic cadence. "Atmospheric contamination critical. Evacuation protocol Gamma 9 active. All personnel report to," the message repeated, unchanged. No distress calls, no panicked voices, just ghosts in the machine. I wiped my face, smearing grime and sweat. The headache behind my eyes pulsed in time with the console's blinking lights. "Okay, Elias, options." My voice sounded too loud in the empty room. "Stay, keep scanning, burn through the last of the power. Or move, risk the surface, try another hub." The sidearm weighed heavy in my pocket, 1 round left. Not enough for a fight, enough for a choice if it came to that. The air vents groaned above me, pushing stale, metallic-tasting air. I could almost hear the shipping hub skeleton settling around me, pipes contracting like dying muscles. A new alert flashed, ***, transmission lost ***. The console spat a final burst of static, then died. The overhead lights dimmed, then brightened, cycling erratically. Backup systems failing. I laughed, sharp and humorless. Of course. Why wouldn't it all go to hell at once? The room was cold, the air biting at my skin. My stomach churned with hunger, the last of my rations long gone. The constant hum of the facility, usually a dull background noise, now seemed to echo with every heartbeat. Distant movements, perhaps the settling of the structure, sent ripples of unease through me. The wind howled outside, a relentless symphony of despair. Then the first tremor hit. Dust rained from the ceiling, a fine, choking mist that stung my eyes. Somewhere deep in the facility, something collapsed with a wet, grinding crunch. The control room's door, my only exit, buckled inward, hinges screaming in protest. The metal groaned, a sound as eerie as the howling wind, and I felt the floor shift beneath me. Muscle fatigue made my movements sluggish, but I knew I had to act fast. I stumbled to the door, hands shaking as I tried to pry it open. The cold metal bit into my fingers, adding to the pain already radiating through my body. The air was thick with the scent of rust and decay, and my respirator strained to filter it out. The console behind me flickered one last time, a futile attempt to stay alive before darkness swallowed the room. I pushed harder against the door, my muscles screaming in protest. The sound of my own breath, labored and desperate, filled the void. The door gave a little, enough for a sliver of light to peek through. With a final, desperate shove, I forced it open, the hinges screeching in agony. The cold air outside was a shock, but it was better than the suffocating confines of the control room. I stepped out, the ground unsteady beneath my feet. The wind howled louder, a relentless force that seemed to mock my every move. The facility loomed around me, a dying giant groaning in its final moments. I knew I had to keep moving to find another hub to keep searching. But for now, I just stood there, breathing the cold, harsh air and wondering if I had the strength to face whatever came next. The respirator clung to my face like a second skin, its filter already down to 70%. The air tasted stale, metallic, like licking a battery. Day one. Not even a full day since the bombs fell, and I was already underground, scavenging like a rat. The control room was a mess, shattered monitors, overturned chairs, papers strewn everywhere. My head throbbed, a dull ache that made it hard to think. I needed water, food, anything. But mostly, I needed to figure out where the hell I was. The Smart Sort shipping hub wasn't exactly designed for long-term survival. I moved into the next room, my boots crunching on broken glass. The faint hum of emergency lights cast everything in a sickly green glow. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with boxes labeled in a language I didn't recognize. I pried one open, empty. Another empty, of course. Because why would anything be easy? My sidearm weighed heavy on my hip, one round left. One fucking round. Not exactly reassuring. I could hear my own breathing, amplified by the respirator, each inhale a reminder of how finite everything was. The distant drip of water echoed through the corridors, a constant, maddening sound. The next room smelled like mildew and burnt plastic. A row of lockers stood against the wall, their doors slightly ajar. I tugged one open, nothing but a crumpled uniform. Another empty. The third had a single bottle of water. I snatched it up, the plastic cool in my hand. One bottle, probably contaminated, but dehydration would kill me faster than radiation. I cracked it open, took a cautious sip. It tasted off, but I didn't care. My throat felt like sandpaper. The faint sound of the wind whistling through the vents added to the uneasy silence. The last locker had a map. A goddamn map. I unfolded it, squinting in the dim light. The hub was bigger than I thought, storage bays, maintenance tunnels, even a motor pool. But it wasn't designed for people. It was designed for robots. Automated systems, efficiency, not survival. I traced the layout with my finger, trying to memorize it. The map was useless without knowing what was where, and I didn't have time to explore every inch. The distant sound of something heavy hitting the floor echoed through the hub, a metallic clang that made my muscles tense. My hand instinctively went to my sidearm. One round. Against what? I didn't know. Maybe nothing, maybe something. The respirator hissed as I exhaled. I needed to move, but where? And what was I willing to risk? Then the emergency lights flickered, dimmed, and went out. The map crumpled in my fist as darkness swallowed the room. The hum of the lights died, replaced by silence. Perfect. Just fucking perfect. The only sound now was the distant drip of water and the wind howling through the vents, a haunting symphony of isolation. My stomach growled, a reminder of the hunger gnawing at me. Muscle fatigue made each step feel heavier, the cold seeping into my bones. The darkness pressed in, a tangible weight. I needed to find a way out, or at least somewhere safe to rest. But for now I was alone in the dark, with only the questions echoing in my mind. The radio static hissed like a punctured lung. I hunched over the control panel, fingers trembling against the dial, adjusting by fractions until the voice cut through, crisp, automated, alive. This is Emergency Broadcast System Station 47. Atmospheric contamination critical. Evacuation Protocol Gamma 9 initiated. Designated survivors report to Bunker Sigma 12. Medical supplies, decontamination, and rations available. Coordinates follow. The numbers burned into my skull. 12.7 kilometers northeast. A straight shot through the ruins if the streets weren't clogged with fallout and corpses. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth, thick with dust and the copper taste of old blood. The respirator's filter wheezed, 70% left, maybe less. I weighed the pistol in my hand. 1 round, not enough for a fight, enough for a choice. The control room stank of ozone and melted plastic. A dead monitor flickered, casting jagged shadows over the shipping manifests strewn across the floor. Day 1. Like the world needed a reminder. Outside, the wind howled through shattered loading bays, carrying the reek of scorched metal and something sweetly rotten. I could stay. Scavenge the hub deeper, maybe find another filter, another bullet, or gamble on Sigma 12. The broadcast looped, clinical, untroubled by the fact that designated survivors probably didn't include shipping clerks who'd been taking a piss break when the sirens hit. My head throbbed. The headache had teeth now, gnawing behind my eyes. I tore open a desk drawer, empty except for a half-melted stress ball, squeezed it. The foam crackled like dead skin. The coordinates glared from the notepad where I'd scrawled them. 12.7 clicks. 3 hours on foot if I didn't choke on fallout first. If the bunker door hadn't been welded shut by panicked bureaucrats. Wasn't just another trap. The radio sputtered. The voice vanished. Static swallowed it whole. Then a new sound from the hallway, something heavy dragging itself toward the control room. Not wind, not debris, breathing. The sound was ragged, labored, each exhale a wet rasp. My stomach churned and my muscles tightened, aching from the cold and the long hours of inactivity. The floor creaked under the weight of whatever was approaching, the sound mingling with the distant drip of water and the howl of the wind. I pressed myself against the wall, the pistol feeling like a toy in my hand. The air grew colder, the silence broken by the rhythmic thud of footsteps. My eyes strained in the dim light, trying to make out the shape moving in the shadows. The stress ball slipped from my grip, landing with a soft thud on the floor. A low growl echoed through the hallway and the thing appeared, a hunched, malformed silhouette, its movements jerky and unnatural. The stench of decay rolled off it in waves, mingling with the metallic tang of blood. My heart clenched, not in fear but in a dull, heavy resignation. This was the world now, a place where the dead walked and the living hid. The creature paused, its head tilting as it sensed my presence. The air seemed to thicken, the tension palpable. I knew I had to act, but my body was slow, muscles screaming in protest. The pistol felt heavy, the single round my only hope. The creature took a step forward, its breath a fetid cloud in the cold air. I raised the gun, my hand shaking, and aimed. The world narrowed to a single point. The creature's head, the cold metal of the pistol, the static hiss of the radio behind me. The decision was made. I had to move, to act, or be consumed by the darkness that was closing in. My finger tightened on the trigger, and the room held its breath. The air tasted like burnt plastic and rust, and my throat felt like I'd swallowed sandpaper. The respirator clung to my face, its filter barely holding out. The control room was a tomb of flickering monitors and dead screens, the hum of the ventilation system long gone. I stared at the radio, its static crackling like a dying animal. The transmission repeated, tinny and distorted. Atmospheric contamination critical. Evacuation protocol Gamma 9 initiated. Designated survivors report to bunker Sigma 12. 12.7 kilometers northeast. 12.7 kilometers, through hell probably. My head throbbed, a relentless drumbeat behind my eyes. I leaned against the console, my legs shaky. The respirator's gauge showed 70%, enough for maybe a few hours if I moved slow. But slow wasn't an option. The radio's message was a lifeline, a thread of hope in this godforsaken hole. But threads break. I glanced at the sidearm on my hip, its weight familiar but useless now. One round. One shot, that's all I had left. If I stayed here, I'd die. If I left, I'd probably die. Pick your poison, Elias. The shelves in the next room were stacked with boxes, some torn open, their contents spilled like intestines. I rummaged through them, hands shaking. A half-empty water bottle, warm and stale, but I drank it anyway. My stomach growled, a reminder I hadn't eaten since, when? Day 1. It felt like a lifetime ago. I stuffed a few protein bars into my pockets, their wrappers crinkling like fragile promises. The respirator hissed faintly, its filter straining against the contaminated air. I couldn't stay here, couldn't, but 12.7 kilometers, through streets littered with radiation and worse. I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. Well, Elias, I muttered, either you die trying or die waiting. Your call. The respirator's gauge dipped to 69%. Time was running out. I slid the sidearm back into its holster, adjusted the respirator, and stepped toward the door. The handle felt cold, metallic, and slick with condensation. I turned it, the mechanism creaking like a death rattle. Outside, the corridor was dark, save for the faint glow of emergency lights. My boots echoed against the concrete, each step louder than the last. Distant drips echoed through the abandoned hall, the sound of water finding its way through the ruins. I reached the stairwell, its metal steps spiraling upward into darkness. The air grew thicker, heavier as I climbed. My head pounded harder, the headache now a vice. At the top, I pushed open the door. The blast door, half sealed, groaned as I forced it open. The outside world greeted me with a blinding haze, the sky a sickly orange. The respirator's gauge dropped to 68%. I stepped forward, my boots crunching on broken glass. The streets were silent, empty, but I knew better. A faint rustling came from the shadows, quick and deliberate. My hand went to the sidearm, but I hesitated. One round, one shot, and whatever was out there wasn't alone. I froze, the respirator hissed, the only sound I could hear. The wind picked up, carrying with it a low moan that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Too late to turn back now. The airlock's pressure gauge flickered between *hazardous and you're dead *. I weighed the math out loud because the silence was worse. Option 1, stay here, starve slow, hope Sigma 12 still standing. Option 2, hike through a radioactive hellscape with a gun that's basically a noisemaker. A laugh scraped out of my throat. Option 3, eat the bullet now and skip the queue. Dark humor, but the panic wasn't joking. I pocketed the protein bars, their foil wrappers crinkling like distant gunfire. The sidearm went into my waistband, cold metal against my spine, a reminder. The airlock's outer door had a manual release, rusted shut. I kicked it twice. On the third try, something snapped and the mechanism screeched like nails on a chalkboard. Outside, the wind carried the stench of melted asphalt and something sweetly rotten. The sky was the color of a fresh bruise. My boots hit the ground and the respirator's display immediately spiked. Particulate overload *. Sigma 12 was 12.7 kilometers away. The gun had one round. The filter wouldn't last. The cold seeped through my clothes, a relentless chill that made my muscles ache. Each step felt heavier, the weight of the respirator and the sidearm a constant reminder of the precariousness of my situation. The wind howled through the ruins, carrying the faint sound of distant movement, a low rumble that sent shivers down my spine. The air was thick with the scent of decay, a constant reminder of the world's demise. Then the ground vibrated. Not an earthquake, something moving, and it wasn't human. The sound of scuttling, of metal scraping against metal, grew louder. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, but I forced myself to stay still to listen. The airlock behind me offered a false sense of safety, but I knew it was no refuge. The only way out was forward, into the unknown. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of the unknown creature closer. The rustling and scraping grew more urgent, more distinct. My fingers tightened around the sidearm, the cold metal a comfort and a curse. The distance to Sigma 12 seemed insurmountable, but the alternative was worse. I took a deep breath, the respirator hissing in protest, and stepped forward, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The hatch groaned like a dying animal as I forced it open, metal grinding against concrete. Dust rained down, catching in my throat even through the respirator. First breath of surface air in how long? Day 1, according to the peeling emergency calendar, still stuck to the bunker wall. The light hit like a physical blow, gray and sickly through the ash-choked sky. I squinted at the horizon. The Smart Sort shipping hub's skeleton jutted upward, half collapsed, its solar panels hanging like broken teeth. The wind carried the stench of burnt plastic and something meaty underneath. My stomach twisted. The respirator's filter gauge read 70%, but the air tasted like battery acid anyway. I crouched behind a shattered forklift, scanning. No movement. Just the distant creak of metal settling, the occasional pop of cooling debris. My head throbbed in time with it, dehydration gnawing at my thoughts. One live round left in the sidearm. Not enough for a fight, enough for a choice, though. I tore open the protein bar box with shaking hands. 3 left, crushed into sticky crumbs. Chewing felt like swallowing sand. Real gourmet shit, I muttered, wiping my mouth. The transmission looped in my skull, 12.7 kilometers northeast. Sigma 12. Could have been a death sentence. Could have been salvation. The hub's remains might have had supplies, but staying meant gambling on scavengers not finding me first. My boots crunched over broken glass as I moved toward the ruins, each step sending needles up my shins. A locker near the east wall may be intact, maybe booby-trapped. The smart play was to move, but smart plays didn't account for the way my vision blurred at the edges. Then the wind shifted. The smell hit harder, closer. Not just burnt meat now. Rot. Something moved in the shadows of the loading bay, a shape too deliberate to be debris. I froze. The protein bar turned to lead in my gut, one bullet. One shot at quiet. Or I could run, let the thing hear me, and pray my legs held out longer than its did. The respirator's filter ticked down to 69%. The distant dripping of water and the creaking of metal seemed to grow louder, a symphony of dread. My muscles ached with the effort of remaining still, the cold seeping into my bones. The choice felt like a betrayal of everything I'd survived so far, but the decision was already made by the time the shape in the shadows took a step closer. The air tasted like burnt plastic and wet metal, sharp enough to make my teeth ache. My respirator hissed faintly, its filter down to 70%. I stumbled into the Smart Sort shipping hub, the blistered asphalt outside crunching under my boots like broken glass. The Geiger counter strapped to my belt ticked steadily, a low-level reminder that this place wasn't safe, just safer than out there. My head throbbed, every step sending a spike of pain through my skull. Day 1 asterisk, I thought bitterly. Not even a full day and the world was already ash. The building was a gutted shell, its walls scorched but still standing. I crouched behind a toppled conveyor belt, my sidearm clutched in my hand. 1 live round left. 1. I laughed darkly at the absurdity of it, a single bullet against the end of the world. My body screamed for water, my throat raw and dry, but all I had was a half-crushed box of protein bars scavenged from a wrecked supply crate. I tore one open, the chalky taste sticking to my tongue like paste. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate. I froze, my finger tightening on the trigger. A figure emerged from the shadows. A woman, her face streaked with grime, a makeshift bandage wrapped around her arm. She held up her hands, palms out. The respirator's filter wheezed like a dying animal, and the taste of burnt plastic clung to my tongue no matter how much I spat. Day 1, and already the world had turned into a bad sci-fi flick. I crouched behind a collapsed conveyor belt in the shipping hub, staring at the half-crushed box of protein bars like it was the goddamn holy grail. One live round left in the sidearm. Not exactly an ace up my sleeve. The cold seeped through my jacket, making my muscles ache and my teeth chatter. The sound of dripping water echoed from somewhere deep in the shadows, a constant reminder of the decay around us. Then the shuffling started, not the dragging steps of the half-dead, too deliberate. I pivoted, gun raised, and nearly shot the woman standing 6 feet away, hands up, her face streaked with soot and something that might have been dried blood. "Medical training," she said, voice muffled through her cracked goggles. "Samantha, you look like hell." I didn't lower the gun, Elias, and hell's got better air quality. The Geiger counter's steady ticking underscored the joke, which fell flatter than the asphalt outside. She nodded at my temple where a throbbing ache had taken up permanent residence. "Concussion, probably. You're squinting like a drunk in daylight." The wind howled through the crater, carrying the stench of wet metal and something worse, charred meat maybe. My stomach twisted, adding to the discomfort. I waited, trust a stranger or bleed out the last of my luck solo. "What's the trade?" She shrugged. "You've got food, I've got skills, and a working knowledge of where the corporate first aid kits are stashed in this place." The protein bars weighed heavy in my pocket, 3 left maybe, enough for a day if I stretched it. First aid kits got morphine. Expired 2 years ago. But hey, placebo effect's better than screaming. I lowered the gun, muscles protesting the movement. "Fine, but you try anything, I've got 1 bullet with your name on it." She snorted. Dramatic, I'd have gone for the kneecap first. The kit was exactly where she said, stashed under a desk, dust-coated but intact. As Samantha reached for it, a distant movement caught my eye, a shadow flitting just beyond the reach of the dim emergency lights. The wind whistled through the broken windows, carrying the faint sound of distant footsteps. My skin prickled with unease. Then the radio crackled to life, a new voice cutting through the static. Not the evacuation message. Closer, angrier, and definitely not human. Samantha froze mid-reach for the bandages. "You hear that?" The Geiger counter's ticking spiked, a harsh reminder of the unseen dangers that lurked in the shadows. The air smelled like burnt hair and wet concrete, the kind of stench that clung to the back of your throat. I pressed my back against the crumbling wall of the shipping hub, counting the seconds between Geiger ticks, steady but not comforting. Low-level radiation just meant slow death instead of fast. Samantha crouched beside me, her respirator fogging with each shaky breath. She held the last protein bar between us like a holy relic. "1 bite each," she said. "Then we move." I cracked the bar in half. It tasted like sawdust and regret. 12.7 kilometers northeast, I muttered, wiping grit from the crumpled transmission note. "Bunker Sigma 12, assuming the coordinates aren't bullshit." Samantha's gloves scraped over the concrete as she unfolded a scavenged map. "We've got 2 options. Follow the highway exposed but fast, or cut through the drainage tunnels. Dark, cramped, probably flooded." She tapped the paper. "Your call." I stared at the single live round left in my sidearm. Highway's a death sentence if we run into anyone, but the tunnels. The thought of wading through radioactive sludge made my skin crawl. 1 misstep and we're drowning in it. She exhaled hard. "We're already drowning." A sound cut through the silence, metal screeching, something heavy being dragged. Too close. Samantha's hand clamped over my wrist, 6 feet away. The shadow moved just beyond the shattered window. Human-shaped, but the way it lurched wasn't right. I gripped the pistol. 1 shot. 1 chance. Samantha's voice was a whisper. "We don't know if it's hostile." "Don't care." My thumb hovered over the hammer. "We can't risk it." The thing outside stopped, asterisk, like it heard us. Then the respirator's filter alarm beeped, a shrill, panicked whine, 30% left. Samantha's eyes locked onto mine. We're out of time. The shadow took a step forward. And the light died. The darkness was absolute, a thick, oppressive blanket that smothered every sense. The distant sound of dripping water echoed through the shipping hub, a constant reminder of the damp, cold air that seeped into our bones. My stomach growled, a reminder of the hunger gnawing at me, and my muscles ached from the long, tense hours of hiding. "Day 1, Samantha whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling of our respirators. "We need to decide now." The shadow outside the window seemed to loom larger in the dark, a silent threat. Every creak and groan of the old building made my nerves jangle. The wind whistled through the cracks, a mournful song that seemed to warn us of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. I tightened my grip on the pistol, feeling the cold metal against my palm. "Highway," I decided, my voice firm despite the doubt gnawing at me. "We'll take the highway. It's faster, and we can see what's coming." Samantha nodded, her face a pale blur in the darkness. "Agreed. But we need to move fast. The alarm won't last long, and we can't afford to be caught unprepared." I stood up, my muscles protesting with every movement. The pain in my legs was a dull throb, a constant reminder of the toll this place was taking on us. Samantha followed suit, her movements equally stiff. We moved in unison, a well-practiced dance of survival. As we stepped out into the open, the cold air seemed to bite at our skin, a sharp contrast to the oppressive heat of the shipping hub. The highway stretched out before us, a straight, empty path that offered no cover but promised a quicker journey. The distant sound of the wind carried the faintest hint of movement, a reminder that we were not alone. We started walking, our footsteps echoing in the stillness. The protein bar was already settling in my stomach, a small comfort in the vast, unforgiving world around us. Each step brought us closer to Bunker Sigma 12, a glimmer of hope in the darkness. But the shadow at the window lingered in my mind, a silent reminder of the dangers that lay ahead. As the first day of our journey began, I knew that every step would be a battle for survival. The road buckles under my boots like a spine snapped mid-scream. Day 2, and the asphalts decided to grow teeth, jagged waves of blackened tar chewing at my soles. Sam stumbles behind me, her respirator hissing like a pissed-off cat. The air smells like a salon burned down inside a cement mixer. My head's a church bell someone won't stop swinging. 12.7 clicks, I mutter, squinting at the Geiger's steady asterisk tick-tick-tick. Assuming northeast hasn't been redefined as straight into hell. Sam's laugh is a dry cough. Optimist. She nudges the half-crushed protein bar box in my pocket. "Bet you 5 rads it's sawdust flavored." The crater's edge yawns to our left, a 30-foot drop into God's garbage disposal. Shadows slither in the ruins ahead. Could be wind, could be the thing that's been keeping pace with us since the shipping hub. 6 feet of unknown asterisk lurking in the chemical fog. My sidearms got 1 round left. 1 options. Sam's voice is sandpaper. I weigh it out loud because silence is worse. Run and whatever's out there hears us. Fight and we're down to harsh language after 1 shot. Hide and the clock ticks louder. The Geiger agrees. Sam peels her respirator away just long enough to spit. "Hide" off the table. "My filters are at 70%. Yours?" "Same." I thumb the protein bars. "Calorie math says we're fucked by dawn either way." A scrap of metal clatters in the fog. Closer now. Sam's boot grinds glass into the road. So we run. We do. The crater laughs beside us, the Geiger's ticking spikes, and the protein bars, definitely sawdust. Then the road disappears. Ahead the asphalt's sheared clean off, a 10-foot gap where the ground just gave up. The detour's through a skeletal office building, its windows staring like dead eyes. Inside something moves, something big asterisk. Sam exhales. "Well. Shit." The thing behind us takes another step. The sound of its footfall echoes in the silence, a deep, resonant thud that sends a shiver down my spine. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of decay and rust. The building looms, its hollow eyes watching us. Each step feels heavier, the weight of the unknown pressing down on my shoulders. We exchange a glance, and without a word, we start toward the building. The door creaks open, a mournful groan that seems to echo through the entire structure. Inside, the air is thick with dust and the faint whisper of movement. The Geiger's ticks grow more frantic, a constant reminder of the danger that surrounds us. "Stay close," I whisper, my voice barely audible over the din. Sam nods, her eyes scanning the shadows. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant scrape, sends a bolt of unease through me. The building is alive with the sounds of its own decay, each noise a potential threat. We move cautiously, the air growing colder with each step. The darkness is oppressive, and the light from our flashlights barely cuts through the fog. The sound of dripping water echoes from somewhere deep within the building, a steady, maddening rhythm that adds to the tension. Suddenly, a shadow moves in the corner of my eye. I freeze, my hand tightening on the sidearm. Sam's respirator hisses louder, her breath quickening. The movement is gone, but the sense of being watched remains. "Did you see that?" I whisper. Sam's voice is barely a whisper. "Yeah, we need to keep moving." We press on, the gap in the road a looming threat behind us. The building's interior is a maze of broken walls and shattered glass. Each step is a gamble, the ground unsteady beneath our feet. The sound of the thing behind us grows closer, a relentless pursuit that sends a chill through my bones. Finally, we reach the other side of the building. The gap in the road is still there, but the immediate threat seems to have passed. We exchange a relieved glance, but the tension doesn't ease. The thing is still out there, and we know it's only a matter of time before it catches up. "Let's go," Sam says, her voice a mix of determination and fear. We step out of the building, the cold air hitting us like a slap. The road stretches ahead, a path of jagged teeth waiting to tear at our souls. The Geiger's ticks are a steady reminder of the danger, but we have no choice. We start running again, the sound of our footsteps mingling with the distant echoes of the thing behind us. The road seems endless, a cruel joke played by the universe. My muscles burn with each step, the cold seeping into my bones. The protein bars offer little comfort, their sawdust flavor a bitter reminder of our dire situation. But we keep moving, driven by the hope that the next step might lead us to safety.
The cracked asphalt groaned underfoot, buckling like a spine under too much weight. Day 2, and the air still tasted like someone torched a salon full of perm chemicals. My respirator wheezed 70% filter life left, if the display wasn't lying. Sam nudged a warped shipping container with her boot, the metal screeching like a dying animal. "Protein bars won't last us till sundown," she muttered. I didn't argue. My skull was splitting open from dehydration, and the Geiger's steady tick-tick-tick wasn't helping. The Smart Sword hub's loading bay gaped like a rotten mouth, half collapsed. We picked through the wreckage, shattered pallets, a forklift tipped on its side, oil pooling black and iridescent. Sam's flashlight caught the glint of a dented locker. Inside, 3 rusted cans labeled peaches and syrup. The labels were peeling, but the seals held. "Either dinner or botulism," she said, tossing me one. I weighed it in my hand. 400 grams of maybe-food. My stomach growled. The last protein bar had been sawdust and regret. Then the smell hit, burnt hair and wet concrete, sure, but underneath it, something sour. Rotting meat. Sam froze, her light sweeping across the bay. Shadows pooled in the corners, thick enough to choke on. My sidearm had 1 round left. Useless, unless whatever was out there agreed to stand very still and politely wait for me to miss. "We could backtrack," I whispered. "Try the residential blocks." Sam's jaw tightened. "Or we clear this place now, while we've got light." The Geiger stuttered, then steadied. 0.8 millisieverts. Not great, not lethal. A scrape of metal on concrete. Not us. 6 feet to our left, behind a stack of crushed crates. Sam's hand closed around a broken pipe. My pulse was a trapped bird, flailing against my ribs. "Hey," I called out, voice cracking. "We're not here for trouble." Silence. Then a wet, ragged breath. "Human." Probably the transmission had mentioned other survivors, Bunker Sigma 12, 12.7 clicks northeast. But the voice in my head, the one that sounded like my drill sergeant, hissed, "Designated survivors don't lurk in shipping hubs." Sam shifted her grip on the pipe. "Elias," she said, too calm. "We've got company." The shadow moved. The distant sound of a door creaking echoed through the bay, mingling with the faint drip of water. My muscles ached from the cold, and the weight of the can in my hand felt like a hollow promise. The wind whistled through the cracks, carrying a low, unsettling hum. I strained to hear more, but the only sound was the steady drip and the occasional scuttle of debris. "Stay here," Sam whispered, inching forward. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, dancing over the crumpled metal and twisted frames. My fingers tightened around the can, the metal cold and unyielding. Every step she took was an echo of tension, a reminder that we were not alone. The Geiger's steady tick-tick-tick was a constant, oppressive rhythm, a drumbeat of impending doom. Suddenly, a shape emerged from the shadows, hunched and distorted. Sam's light caught the glint of eyes, dark and hollow. The figure was emaciated, its movements jerky and unnatural. It let out a low, guttural growl, the sound sending shivers down my spine. Sam raised her pipe, her stance firm but wary. "We don't want to hurt you," she said, her voice steady but strained. The figure didn't respond, just continued to advance, its movements slow but deliberate. The drip of water and the distant creaks of the bay seemed to grow louder, each sound a nail in the coffin of our safety. My sidearm felt heavy and useless in my hand, the single round a cruel joke. The cold seeped into my bones, and my muscles trembled with the effort to stay still. "Back up," I whispered, my breath fogging in the frigid air. Sam nodded, her eyes never leaving the figure. We moved backward, step by careful step, the ground unsteady beneath our feet. The figure growled again, the sound a mix of pain and aggression. The wind picked up, carrying the acrid scent of decay and the distant howl of a warning siren. We were cornered, the loading bay a trap of shadows and secrets. The figure drew closer, its presence a dark cloud hanging over us. Sam's grip on the pipe tightened, her knuckles white. "We have to fight," she said, her voice a low, determined whisper. I nodded, my mind racing for a way out. The can in my hand felt heavy, a symbol of our desperate situation. The figure lunged, and the world narrowed to a single, terrifying moment. The air smelled like burnt plastic and wet dog fur, thick enough to coat my tongue. I crouched behind the shattered remains of a delivery van, its tires melted into the blistered asphalt. Samantha pressed against me, her breath ragged through the respirator. Day 2, and already the world had turned into a festering wound. "Elias," she whispered, the Geiger's ticking faster. I didn't need the damn device to tell me. My skull throbbed like a second heartbeat, the radiation headache drilling behind my eyes. The abandoned shipping hub loomed ahead, its skeletal frame casting jagged shadows. Movement flickered in the ruins, too low to be human. "Rats?" Samantha mouthed. I shook my head. The thing that slunk into view was the size of a German shepherd, but its spine jutted through patchy fur like a row of broken teeth. Its muzzle was split down the middle, two sets of yellowed incisors gnashing independently. "Oh, fuck me," I muttered. Samantha's fingers dug into my arm. "There's more." 3 more creatures emerged from the rubble, their movements twitchy, uneven. One dragged a hind leg, the bone protruding like a snapped branch. Their eyes were milky, pupils blown wide blind, maybe, but the way their heads swiveled, nostrils flaring, they didn't need sight. "Options?" Samantha's voice was tight. I had 1 round left. 1. The respirator's filter was at 70%, and the air out here would liquefy our lungs in minutes without it. The creatures were downwind, for now. "We run," I said. "Straight through the hub. Hope they're slow." "And if they're not?" I didn't answer. The lead creature's head snapped toward us. A wet, clicking sound rattled from its throat. Then they charged. We bolted. The world narrowed to the slap of our boots on warped concrete, the guttural snarls closing in. Samantha vaulted over a collapsed shelf, and I followed, my ribs screaming. Something clipped my heel, claws, teeth, and I stumbled, skidding on my palms. The pain barely registered. The creatures were faster than they looked. Samantha yanked me up, and we crashed through a rusted door into the hub's gutted interior. The stench of rotting meat hit me like a fist. A severed hand lay near my boot, fingers curled. "Barricade the door," she shouted. I shoved a filing cabinet against it, but the metal groaned under the first impact. The creatures weren't stopping. And then I saw it, a rusted service ladder leading to the roof. "Up," I gasped. "Now." We climbed, the ladder shuddering under our weight. The door below burst open just as my fingers closed around the rooftop ledge. I hauled myself over, then reached for Samantha. Her boots slipped. She caught the edge at the last second, dangling over a 20-foot drop. The creatures piled beneath her, jaws snapping. "Elias." I grabbed her wrist. Her skin was slick with sweat, the ladder shook. One of them was climbing. Scene 16. The door groaned like a dying thing when we forced it open, hinges screaming rust. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and the ghost of old wood smoke, a welcome change from the chemical stink outside. Samantha dragged a splintered chair under the doorknob, her hands shook, fingers black with grime and dried blood. "That won't hold anything," she muttered, but it was something. I slumped against the wall, legs giving out. My head throbbed in time with the Geiger's erratic clicks, each one sharper than the last. The house was a time capsule, cracked floral wallpaper, a toppled bookshelf spilling paperbacks with warped covers. A child's crayon drawing still clung to the fridge, sun faded to ghosts of stick figures. Day 2, and already the world felt like a museum of dead things. Samantha tossed me one of the protein bars. It tasted like sawdust and stale chocolate, but my stomach didn't care. She peeled back the lid of a peach can with her knife, the metal screeching. 12 calories per slice, she said, like it mattered. The syrup was cloying, too sweet, but we lapped it up anyway. Outside, the wind howled through shattered windows, carrying the scent of wet ash. Something scraped against the siding, too deliberate to be debris. We froze. The Geiger stuttered, then hissed. "You hear that?" Samantha whispered. I nodded. 3 distinct drags, like something heavy being pulled. Then silence. She pressed her back to the wall, sidearm raised. 1 round left. Could be an animal. Or the thing that made those tracks near the crater, I said. The ones with too many toes. The scratching came again, closer this time. The chair under the doorknob trembled. Samantha exhaled, slow. Plan? I gripped my knife. Hope it's not hungry. The floorboards groaned under my weight as I shifted, the splintered chair wedged against the door rattling like a warning. Samantha's fingers trembled as she twisted the radio dial, static hissing like a live wire. Day 2, and the air still stank of burnt plastic and something sweetly rotten, those peaches we'd found, maybe, or the walls themselves sweating decay. The Geiger counter's ticking had climbed to a steady click-click-click, like a clock counting down to nothing. Then the static broke. A voice, crisp and automated, cut through the noise. Asterisk atmospheric contamination critical. Evacuation protocol Gamma 9 initiated. Designated survivors report to Bunker Sigma 12. 12.7 kilometers northeast. Asterisk. Samantha's breath hitched. That's not what the last broadcast said. I dug my nails into my palm. The last one had screamed stay put, seal all entry points. Now they wanted us to march northeast? Through that? Outside, the asphalt had warped into jagged black teeth, the air beyond the window shimmering with heat and poison. My head throbbed, a dull drill behind my eyes. Either someone fucked up the script, I muttered, or they're hurting us. She chewed her lip, eyes darting to the respirator hanging off my belt. Filters at 70%. If we move fast. 12 clicks in this? I gestured to the window. The thing outside, whatever it was, hadn't moved. 6 feet away, just beyond the wall. We'd heard it scratching at the siding an hour ago, a sound like nails on chalkboard. We'd be glowing by kilometer 3. The radio crackled again, the same message looping. Samantha's knuckles whitened around it. Or we stay here and starve. Or get eaten. Or. A creak from the hallway. Not the house settling. Something wet dripped onto the floorboards. We froze. The Geiger counter's click sped up, a relentless drumbeat in the silence. The cold seeped through my clothes, a constant reminder of the thin line between life and death. Hunger knotted my stomach, a dull ache that competed with the pounding in my head. My muscles ached from the constant tension, every movement a calculated risk. The wind outside howled, a mournful cry that seemed to carry the weight of all the world's sorrows. Distant movements, faint and unsettling, echoed through the walls, as if the house itself was alive and watching us. The air felt thick, heavy with the stench of decay and the metallic tang of radiation. Samantha's voice was barely a whisper. What do we do? I didn't have an answer. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in, the darkness outside an endless abyss. The only sounds were the steady drip, the relentless ticking of the Geiger counter, and the distant, relentless wind. Each second stretched into an eternity, the tension mounting. Then, another creak, closer this time. The floorboards groaned as if under the weight of something unseen. My heart clenched, not from fear, but from the sheer exhaustion of it all. We were running out of time, and the choices before us were grim. The radio crackled once more, the automated voice relentless. Atmospheric contamination critical. Evacuation protocol Gamma 9 initiated. Designated survivors report to bunker Sigma 12. 12.7 kilometers northeast. Samantha's eyes met mine, a silent plea for a decision. The world outside was a nightmare, but staying here was a slow death. The dripping grew louder, a constant reminder of the unknown threats that lurked just beyond our reach. The Geiger counter's clicks sped up, a final warning. The floorboards groaned under something that wasn't human anymore. The splintered chair wedged under the doorknob wouldn't hold if it really wanted in. My fingers twitched toward the sidearm, one round left, and I wasn't betting on my aim with a headache splitting my skull like an axe. Samantha's breath hitched beside me, her knuckles white around the rusted can of peaches. Day 2, and the world had already turned into a bad punchline: survive the bombs, die to whatever the hell that is. The radio crackled again, that same automated loop. Bunker Sigma 12. 12.7 kilometers northeast. The voice was too calm, like it hadn't noticed the air tasted like burnt plastic and the Geiger counter's ticking had sped up to a dentist's drill. What if it's a trap? Sam's voice was raw. She had a point. Last time we trusted a broadcast, we ended up knee-deep in a flooded subway with things moving in the water. But the respirator filters were at 70%, and the protein bars wouldn't last. Outside, the asphalt had blistered upward, jagged as broken teeth. Staying here meant waiting for the thing at the door to get bored or hungry. I pressed my palm to the wall. The wood was damp, sweating mildew. We don't go, we starve. Or that thing gets in. We go, maybe we walk into a military execution. Or maybe there's actual walls between us and the fallout. Sam's laugh was a dry cough. Optimism? Now. The radio hissed static. The thing outside scraped against the door long, slow, like it was savoring the wait. We went. The chair splintered as we shoved past it, the thing's breath hot and sour at our backs. The air outside was a relief for exactly 3 seconds before the Geiger counter spiked. The cold wind carried the stench of decay and something metallic. Northeast meant crossing the river. The bridge was gone, of course. The water glittered under the ash-heavy sky, deceptively still. Sam's boot sank into the bank's mud with a wet gasp. Then the first gunshot rang out from the tree lean. The thing behind us howled, a sound that echoed through the desolate landscape. The thing ahead of us had bullets. Every step felt heavier, the weight of the world pressing down on us. The ground was uneven, and my muscles ached from the constant tension. The wind howled, carrying the distant sound of something moving, something that didn't belong in this world. The dripping of water from the damaged buildings added to the eerie symphony. Sam's hand trembled as she reached for the last can of peaches, her fingers slipping on the rust. "We have to keep moving," I said, my voice hoarse. The cold seeped into my bones, and my stomach gnawed with hunger. The thing behind us was getting closer, its breath a rasping whisper that seemed to fill the air. The radio crackled again, the automated voice a mockery of calm in the midst of chaos. 12.7 kilometers northeast. Bunker Sigma 12. The words looped through my mind, a mantra of hope and desperation. The bridge was gone, but the river was our only path. The water was dark and treacherous, but it was our only chance. Sam's boot slipped again, and she stumbled, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I grabbed her arm, pulling her up, the cold biting into my fingers. The thing behind us howled again, the sound mingling with the distant sound of gunfire. The world had turned into a nightmare, and every step felt like a betrayal. But we kept moving, driven by the hope that somewhere, somehow, there was a place to hide, a place to breathe, a place to survive. The thing behind us was relentless, but so were we. We had to be. Because the only other option was to give up, and that was not an option. Not yet. The road to Bunker Sigma 12 was a jagged hellscape of buckled asphalt, warped upward like the ribs of some fossilized beast. My boots crunched over the cracked surface, each step sending a jolt through my already aching knees. Samantha clung to my arm, her respirator fogging with every shallow breath. The Geiger counter strapped to my belt clicked faster, louder, like it was mocking us. Day 3, and the world was still trying to kill us, just slower now. The transmission had said 12.7 kilometers northeast. It might as well have been 1,000. The air smelled of mildew and the faint, bitter tang of wood smoke, which was somehow better than the chemical stench outside. My head throbbed, a relentless drumbeat that made it hard to think. I fumbled for the half-crushed box of protein bars in my pack. "Here," I muttered, handing one to Samantha. She stared at it like it was a grenade. "Eat? We're not gonna make it if you pass out." She took it, her fingers trembling. I popped one in my mouth, the taste like cardboard in despair. The rusted cans of peaches rattled in my pack, taunting me with their uselessness. No opener. Just 3 little metal prisons of sugar and hope. My sidearm weighed heavy on my hip, 1 live round left. 1 shot. 1 mistake. I kept glancing over my shoulder, the sense of something or someone close gnawing at me. The Geiger counter ticked louder, faster. "Elias," Samantha whispered, her voice muffled by the respirator. "What if it's not safe? What if it's worse?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The bunker was our only shot, but she wasn't wrong. What if it was sealed? What if it was already full? What if it was just another tomb? The questions clawed at me, but there was no choice. We couldn't go back. A low growl cut through the silence, closer than I'd expected. Less than 6 feet. I froze, my hand hovering over the sidearm. Samantha's grip tightened on my arm. The Geiger counter screamed now, a frantic staccato. "Run," I hissed, shoving her ahead. "Just run." The asphalt buckled underfoot as we sprinted, the sound of something wrong, pursuing us. My lungs burned, my head pounded, but we didn't stop. The cold wind bit at my skin, and the distant rustle of movement added to the growing tension. The bunker had to be close. It had to be. And then we saw it, a rusted metal hatch set into the ground, partially obscured by debris. Relief flooded me for half a second until I noticed the claw marks gouged into the metal. Fresh. My heart skipped a beat, and I glanced back at Samantha, her eyes wide with fear. The growl grew louder, closer. We had no time to think, no time to doubt. "Help me clear this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We both bent down, hands shaking, and began to clear the debris. Each piece of rubble seemed to weigh a ton, our muscles screaming in protest. The wind picked up, carrying the distant howl of whatever was chasing us. The Geiger counter's frantic clicks seemed to blend with the harsh sounds of our breathing. We managed to clear enough space to pry the hatch open, the rusted metal protesting with a screech. The darkness below was a welcome respite from the relentless exposure. I glanced back one last time, the silhouette of the pursuing creature just visible in the dim light. With a final push, we both tumbled into the dark confines of the bunker, the hatch slamming shut behind us. The world outside seemed to howl in fury, a symphony of dripping water, distant movement, and the relentless wind. Inside, the silence was deafening. The bunker loomed ahead, a hulking slab of concrete half-buried in the scorched earth. Day 3, and the air tasted like rust and burnt plastic. My head throbbed in time with the Geiger's frantic ticking, each step grinding gravel underfoot. Samantha's cough echoed behind me, ragged and wet. The respirator's filter was down to 70%, and I could feel the grit coating my tongue. The bunker's entrance was sealed tight, a steel door flanked by cameras and reinforced with welded beams. Someone had been here. Someone who didn't want visitors. "Elias," Samantha whispered, her voice cracking. "You see that?" I did. The door wasn't just sealed, it was booby-trapped. Wires snaked across the frame, connected to a crude explosive rigged to blow if tampered with. The air smelled faintly of gunpowder and mildew, a sickly combination that made my stomach churn. My sidearm had one round left. One. Not enough to breach the door, even if I wanted to risk it. The protein bars in my pocket felt like a cruel joke. 12 hours since we'd eaten anything, and the thought of those peaches made my mouth water even as my throat clenched. "We could backtrack," Samantha said, her voice trembling. "Find another way in." I shook my head, the motion sending a spike of pain through my skull. "Backtrack where?" "The radiation's getting worse, and we're down to scraps." "This is it." I stared at the wires, my mind racing. Cutting them might set it off. Trying to disarm it without tools was suicide. But staying out here? With whatever was lurking in the shadows, making the hairs on my neck prickle? That wasn't an option either. The Geiger counter's ticking sped up, a relentless metronome. My hand shook as I reached for the wires, freezing inches away. What if we trigger it on purpose? I muttered, half to myself. Blow the door open and take our chances inside. Samantha's eyes widened. Are you insane? That thing could bring the whole entrance down on us. Yeah, but we're dead either way if we stay out here. My voice cracked, and I hated how desperate I sounded. The cold seeped into my bones, and the headache pulsed like a second heartbeat. I looked at the wires again, my breath fogging the respirator's cracked lens. The sound of distant movement reached us, a faint rustling that seemed to come from the shadows. The wind picked up, carrying with it the distant howl of something inhuman. My muscles ached from the cold, and the weight of my pack felt like an anchor dragging me down. The Geiger's ticking grew louder, a constant reminder of the invisible threat that surrounded us. Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl, less than 6 feet behind us. The air shifted, thick with the stench of rot and burnt fur. I didn't need to turn around to know what was there. The bunker's trap suddenly seemed like the least of our problems. The door groaned open, its rusted hinges screeching like nails on glass. Inside, the air was stagnant, heavy with the smell of mildew and a metallic tang, blood, perhaps. A figure stepped into the dim light, his silhouette bulky, his hand resting on a holstered sidearm. His face was shadowed, but his voice was calm, almost too calm. The door hissed open on rusted hinges, revealing a blinking red terminal. The air inside was stale, thick with the metallic tang of old filters working overtime. My head throbbed, day 3 without real sleep, and the bunker's dim emergency lights felt like knives stabbing at my temples. Sam's fingers dug into my arm as the terminal screen flickered to life. Welcome to Bunker Sigma 12. Automated systems nominal. Radiation shielding at 87%. Please state designation for ration allocation. The voice was flat, synthetic. Too calm. Sam exhaled sharply through her respirator. That's not a recording. It's waiting for input. I leaned in, my boots sticking to the floor. Something viscous had dried there years ago, pulling at my soles with each step. Designation Elias Weimar. Survivor, per evacuation protocol Gamma 9. A pause. The terminal beeped. Designation recognized. Ration allocation, 300 calories per day. Water rationing in effect, please deposit deceased personnel in the incineration chute to conserve resources. Sam's laugh was brittle, a sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. Charming. The screen updated, displaying a map of the bunker, sections marked in red, locked down. One blinked, containment breach. Quarantine active. The Geiger counter on my belt spiked, a rapid staccato. My stomach churned, a mix of hunger and dread. Sam tapped the screen. Hey, tin can. What's the date on your last protocol update? Another pause. Current directives issued, October 17, 1992. Awaiting command override. I stared at the rusted cans in my pack. 30-year-old peaches. 30-year-old rules. The AI wouldn't unlock the medical bay without a corpse to burn. The air tasted like copper and dust, and my throat was parched. Every breath felt like a labor, the cold seeping into my bones. Sam's voice dropped. So it's still waiting for a dead guy to show up before it hands out bandages, fantastic. The terminal beeped again. Warning, unscheduled life signs detected in Sector C, activating defense protocols. The lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. Somewhere deep in the bunker, something heavy clunked into motion. The sound echoed through the corridors, mingling with the distant dripping of water and the creaking of old metal. The walls seemed to close in, the air growing colder, heavier. Sam, we need to find a way to override this system, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We can't afford to wait for something that's never coming. She nodded, her eyes scanning the terminal. Agreed. But first, we need to figure out what's in Sector C. That could be our key. The air grew even more oppressive, as if the bunker itself was breathing down our necks. The Geiger counter continued its relentless chatter, a grim reminder of the dangers that lurked within. We were trapped, and the only way out was through. The airlock hissed shut behind us, sealing us in with Ben and the AI's cold, mechanical voice. Day 3, it felt like a lifetime since we'd stumbled into this tomb. Ben stood by the terminal, his gaunt face lit by the flickering screen. The respirator muffled his voice, but the desperation came through clear as the Geiger counter's relentless ticking. We can't stay here, he said, his eyes darting to the sealed door. The AI's right. Evacuation Protocol Gamma 9 is our only shot. I glanced at Samantha, her face pale under the bunker's dim fluorescent lights. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and something metallic, like rusting iron. My stomach growled, a reminder of the half-crushed box of protein bars in my pack. Ben, listen, I started, my voice hoarse. The AI's been wrong before. Remember the water filtration system? It nearly poisoned us. We can't trust it blindly. The AI's voice cut in, smooth and emotionless. Survival probability increases by 47% if Protocol Gamma 9 is followed, delay reduces this to 12%. The numbers hung in the air like a death sentence. Samantha stepped forward, her boots crunching on the grit-covered floor. The sound of her movements was almost drowned out by the distant dripping of water and the faint rustling of the walls. Ben, think about it. The transmission said Sigma 12 was safe. We're here. We've got supplies, shelter. Out there, she gestured toward the door, where the Geiger counter's ticking had sped up. Out there's death. You saw the asphalt, the air. It's a graveyard. Ben shook his head, his hands gripping the edge of the terminal. The cold metal seemed to bite into his skin, and his knuckles turned white. The AI's got calculations. Data. It's not just guessing. He hesitated, his voice cracking. It's our only chance. I rubbed my temples, the headache pounding like a jackhammer. The bunker was cold, and the chill seeped into my bones, making my muscles ache. Ben, I said slowly, weighing the words. The AI's not infallible. It's a machine. It doesn't feel, it doesn't know, it's just. Just what? Ben snapped, turning to face me. His eyes were wild, desperate. Just our only hope? Because I don't see you coming up with a better plan. Samantha reached out, her voice softening. The distant sound of the wind howling outside the bunker walls added a layer of tension to her words. Ben, we're not saying we stay forever. Just until we know more. Until we're sure. The AI interrupted, its tone chillingly calm. Certainty is impossible. Delay increases risk exponentially. Proceed with Protocol Gamma 9. Ben looked at us, his face a mask of conflict. The cold air seemed to make every breath a struggle, and the faint sound of something scraping against the walls made my skin prickle. I can't. Then the terminal beeped, sharp and urgent. The screen flashed red, warning, external breach detected. Proximity, 12.7 meters. The Geiger counter's ticking surged, filling the bunker with its ominous rhythm. The sound was like a countdown, each tick a step closer to the unknown. Ben's face went pale. It's here, he whispered. Samantha and I exchanged a glance. The sealed door loomed between us and whatever was outside. The AI's voice echoed in the silence. Immediate evacuation recommended. But evacuation meant walking into the unknown. Staying meant facing whatever was scratching at the door. Neither option felt like survival. The cold, the hunger, the pain, all of it seemed to magnify the decision we had to make. The bunker, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. Scene 24. The bunker door groaned like a dying animal when I put my weight against it. Day 3. 3 days of counting cracks in concrete, 3 days of Samantha's fingers drumming the same frantic rhythm on her knee. The air tasted like rust and old sweat, thick enough to choke on. My head throbbed in time with the Geiger counter's stuttering clicks, faster now, sharper. Outside, the asphalt had warped into jagged black teeth, waiting to bite. Samantha crouched by the terminal, her respirator fogging with every exhale. Gamma 9's a death sentence, she said. The screen's glow turned her face corpse blue. But staying here? We've got one bullet left, Elias. One. She flicked the pistol's cylinder open, closed it. A hollow click. The sound stuck in my teeth. I pressed my palm to the door. Cold seeped through the metal, numbing my fingertips. Somewhere beyond it, the wind carried the reek of burning plastic and something sweet rotten, peaches left to spoil in a dead man's pantry. The transmission had said 12.7 kilometers northeast. A joke. We hadn't seen sunlight in 72 hours, and the only map we had was scribbled on the back of a protein bar box. Booby-trapped, I muttered. The door's edges gleamed with fresh weld marks, too precise. Someone had sealed it from the outside. They didn't want us leaving. Or something getting in. Samantha barked a laugh, sharp as the Geiger's spikes. Guess we're popular. She tossed me a can of peaches, the metal dented and slick with condensation. Last supper? I caught it. The weight was wrong, too light. Half empty. My stomach twisted. Outside, the wind howled through the buckled asphalt, a sound like bones grinding. The respirator's filter was at 70%. Not enough. Not for 12.7 kilometers of whatever waited out there. Samantha stood, slinging her pack over one shoulder. Your call. The door trembled under my hand. Not from the wind. Something pressed against the other side. A scrape of metal on metal. A breath, wet, ragged. Too late to stay. Too late to run. I chambered the last round. The air tasted of burnt plastic and wet ash, a foul mixture that clung to the back of my throat. Day 3 since the world ended, and the reality still hadn't fully set in. Not really. My head throbbed with a dull ache, making it hard to think straight. Samantha crouched beside me, her respirator fogging with each shaky breath. The Geiger counter clicked faster now, a relentless metronome counting down to something worse. Outside the bunker, the asphalt had buckled into jagged waves, as if the ground itself was trying to escape. We can't stay here, Samantha muttered, her voice muffled by the respirator. She was right. The transmission said 12.7 kilometers northeast. Bunker Sigma 12. But between us and that promise of safety was a booby-trap door, a ticking Geiger counter, and God knows what else. I stared at the rusted cans of peaches in my hands, their labels faded and illegible. Food. Water. Answers. All of it just out of reach. The air inside the bunker was thick with mildew, a damp rot that clung to the walls. Outside, the chemical stink was worse, but at least it didn't feel like it was crawling into your lungs. My respirator's filter was at 70%, and every breath felt like a gamble. Samantha fiddled with the sidearm, her fingers brushing the single live round. "We could try the door," she said, her voice brittle. "Or we could follow the protocol." I weighed the options out loud, more for myself than her. Door's probably rigged to blow. Protocol's a gamble too. 12.7 kilometers through that? I gestured to the blistered asphalt, the air shimmering with heat and radiation. "Either way, we're screwed." Samantha snorted, a dark laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "At least we've got options. Most people don't even get that. We decided on the protocol. Better to die moving than waiting for the trap to spring." But as we stepped outside, the air hit me like a wall, hot, heavy, and wrong. The Geiger counter's ticking sped up, a frantic rhythm that matched the pounding in my skull. The sound of distant dripping echoed through the empty streets, the wind whistling through the cracks of abandoned buildings. Each step felt heavier, my muscles protesting the effort. Then we heard it. A low, guttural growl, just beyond the wreckage. Something was out there. Watching. Waiting. Samantha froze, her hand tightening on the sidearm. "Well," she said, her voice trembling. "That's new. We didn't have time to think." The growl came again, closer this time. "And the Geiger counter?" It didn't stop. The sound of the counter's clicks mingled with the distant scraping of metal on concrete, the relentless reminder of the unseen danger. The cold seeped into my bones, and my stomach churned with a mix of hunger and fear. Every sense was heightened, every nerve on edge. The wind picked up, carrying the stench of decay and the distant echo of movement. The ground beneath our feet seemed to shift, the asphalt groaning under the weight of the world's collapse. We moved forward, our steps hesitant, the weight of the unknown pressing down on us. The growl grew louder, a low rumble that sent shivers down my spine. The Geiger counter's rapid clicks were a constant, frantic beat, a countdown to something we couldn't escape. Samantha's grip on the sidearm tightened, her knuckles white. "We have to keep moving," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing chaos around us. "We have to find Bunker Sigma 12. I nodded, my throat dry. The world outside the bunker was a nightmare, and we were walking right into it. But there was no turning back. Not now. Not when the only other option was to stay and wait for the inevitable. We pressed on, each step a battle against the cold, the hunger, and the fear of the growl followed us, a relentless reminder that we were not alone.
Scene 9. The street was wrong. Not just broken, wrong. The asphalt had blistered upward in jagged waves, like something beneath had tried to push through and given up halfway. My boots crunched over glass shards that glittered oily under the sick orange haze of the sky. Day 1. The respirator's filter wheezed at 70%, and every breath tasted like burnt plastic and wet metal. A crumpled sign read Smart Sort Shipping Hub, 500 M*, but the arrow pointed at a crater. Then the Geiger counter strapped to my belt stuttered to life. Click, click, click. Not the rapid-fire scream of a hot zone, but the steady, patient ticking of a place that would kill you slow. I crouched behind a flipped delivery van, its undercarriage streaked with dried fluids that smelled like vinegar and rotting meat. The counter climbed, 120 millisieverts, 150. My head throbbed in time with it. Option 1, go around. Adds 2 hours to the route, and the only water I had left was a warm sip in a cracked canteen. Option 2, move fast, stay low, pray the respirator held. I chose stupid. 3 steps in, my boot sank into something soft, a body bloated and split like overripe fruit. The smell punched through the filter, sweet, metallic, fresh. I gagged, lurched forward, and the Geiger counter spiked to 300. A hot wind kicked up, carrying grit that stuck to the sweat on my neck. Halfway across, my vision blurred. The world tilted. I caught myself on a fire hydrant, its rust flaking under my gloves. Then the ground moved. Not an earthquake, something worse. A sewer grate erupted in a spray of black sludge, and the air shrieked with the sound of tearing metal. I ran. Something wet and sharp grazed my calf. Didn't stop until I hit the chain-link fence of the hub's perimeter, ribs burning, mouth full of copper. The Geiger counter laughed in my ear. 450. I checked the canteen. Empty. The last protein bar was a melted lump in my pocket, and the transmission on 12.7 megahertz kept looping. Atmospheric contamination critical. Then I noticed the wet warmth seeping through my pant leg. Not sweat. Too red, too much.